Oh, hello, and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite singers of all time, who I stupidly left off my list of the greatest male vocalists of all time. You can find that under the Live tab on my YouTube channel thingy. And this is, of course, Leon Thomas. Now, one of the things that I talked about in that video is that the voices that I love the most are deep voices. Because if your voice is deep but can have dynamic control, you're on top. There's really nothing you can do wrong if you possess a voice that is naturally gifted with a low register. It's just something marvelous. And maybe for some, it's an acquired taste who are used to voices that are a bit more middle of the road. But if you like people like Johnny Hartman and John Lucian, who I've mentioned before, and I know will mention again, so do hit the subscribe button as a shameless plug, then you'll love Leon Thomas, absolutely marvelous singer. Now, some of you who know that my favorite saxophonist of all time is Pharoah Sanders will recognize his voice that provided a kind of almost ambient texture to his albums Karma and Jewels of Thought from both from 1969, and he later collaborated with Pharoah in the 70s on Isfo Zam, otherwise known as My Gifts, on the wonderful independent jazz label Strata East. That was from 73, and even in the 80s they collaborated on and off. But it's on his solo records where you really get to hear him front and center, and you get to hear that wonderful deep register in all of its glory. The album Spirits Known and Unknown, which was released in 1970, was an absolute wonderful album when it comes to great vocal music. Call it vocal jazz, call it vocal avant-garde, but don't let that fool you, because it's so listenable. It's the kind of thing that you put on and you just think, wow, how can anyone sing like that? Because you don't hear a lot of low voices among singers today. Everything is, again, very middle of the road, very auto-tune. This was a deep, dynamic, rich voice. And what a group of musicians that he had. Lonnie Liston Smith, one of the great keyboard players of all time, was on the album. Pharoah Sanders himself was on the album. He didn't go by his actual name, but he was playing the saxophone. James Spaulding, a great alto sax player on the album. The wonderful, immortal, long may he continue, Roy Haynes on the drums. What a wonderful album. And he really went from strength to strength in the 70s. His follow-up album, the Leon Thomas album, another great cast of musicians. Oliver Nelson did the arrangement. You know him from The Blues and the Abstract Truth. Wonderful stuff. Just excellent. Billy Cobham makes an appearance on the album. And frankly, everything he did in the 70s, you'll probably know the cover image of Blues and the Soulful Truth, kind of hinting at what Oliver Nelson did earlier, because it shows sort of the colorful flames going out of his hair. Very iconic album. And this, again, he always played with such great musicians, which is what made everything come together. A virtuosic voice combined with virtuosic musicians. The great, and at that time, very young Pee Wee Ellis on saxophone. He played with James Brown. He played with Van Morrison, played with Ginger Baker, played with loads of people. Stanley Clarke appears on bass. Bernard Purdie, the wonderful drummer, plays on the drums on most of the album. Cecil Payne on the baritone sax. Really great stuff. Full Circle, that came out the next year in 73. Wonderful album. Again, Pee Wee Ellis is there again. One of my very favorite guitar players, a really overlooked guy called Joe Beck, also on the album. No relationship to Jeff Beck, other than the fact that they're both really good. So, frankly, any of these albums by Leon Thomas from that golden 70s era, you cannot really go wrong with. He even made an appearance on the Welcome album by Santana from 1973. So he was really on fire in that decade. He died at the age of 61 in 1999, and he continued to perform in the 80s and 90s. But it was this 70s era, which was such a wonderful era for so many different kinds of music. The record industry had enough money to furnish the smaller acts from the smaller genres with contracts, but without getting so greedy that they just wanted to put everything into the music they knew the kids would like, and they were always wrong about that in most cases, even though that's nothing the PR department couldn't sort out. But no such compartmentalization or packagization, if you will, of Leon Thomas was required because his voice not only spoke for itself, but more importantly, it sung for itself. Wonderful, wonderful talent. And luckily for you out there, his albums are on the streaming services. Check them out today. You will not be disappointed. Like and subscribe, and we will see you, of course, next time. Take care.